Welcome to the podcast, A Drink with Derek. Follow comedian Derek Richards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch all episodes of the podcast. Now grab a drink and join your host, Derek Richards.
Hey, this is Derek Richards here in Las Vegas. Welcome to the podcast, A Drink with Derek. Make sure you do subscribe to us on YouTube. You can also find us on Rumble. The podcast is also on iTunes as well, Instagram TV. We put it up on Facebook. It goes up on Twitter, all the different social media platforms. It was really cool. I was on a flight last week, and there was a guy literally on the plane next to me in the aisle, right across the aisle from me. He was watching one of the podcast episodes. That was really cool. You don't get to see that very often, but when it happens, it was kind of neat. Anyhow, I'm here in Las Vegas. My guest is in California. We'll get to him in just a moment. Alonzo Bodden, very, very funny comedian. We had the pleasure of working together at Brad Garrett's Comedy Club here in Vegas at the MGM Grand a couple weeks ago, and so excited to have him here on the show. I've got some dates coming up here real soon. I'm going to be with Dave Landau coming up September 30th, Friday, September 30th, over at the Lexington Theater in Lexington, Michigan. There are only a few scattered seats available for that, so go on their website and go to my website, DerekRichards.com, and you can click on the link to get tickets for the show in Lexington. Also, at the State Theater in Bay City, Michigan, on Saturday, October 1st. Tickets are available for that as well. DerekRichards.com is my website. Myself and comedian Dave Landau are going to be an absolute blast. And while you're trolling the internet, grab a copy of my album, grab a copy of my album, Double Down, which is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon, recorded live at Laugh-In Comedy Cafe in Fort Myers. Well, let's get to my guest today. I'm excited. He is a regular panel member on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's got you've seen him on Dr. Phil. You've seen him on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. You've seen him on Jay Leno's Garage. He also has a podcast called Who's Paying Attention? And he also has a brand new special that came out on YouTube called Stupid, Don't Get Tired. Alonzo Bodden here on A Drink with Derek.
Like, can you imagine how smart the scientists and the doctors, the immunologists had to be to come up with a vaccine against COVID? They wasn't ready for stupid. Everyone's angry, you know? If you are an anti-vaxxer, you ain't gonna like the next 10 minutes. I'm serious. I ain't got no time for that bullshit. People be asking me, are you vaccinated? Yeah. Why are you vaccinated? Because there's a vaccine. What the hell? I don't even argue with them. I don't argue with anti-vaxxers. I'm like, nah, just wait a year and a half. You'll be done. I'll tell you the problem. I'll tell you why you can't win the fight against anti-vaxxers, because stupid don't get tired. You ever fight stupid, you ain't got a chance. Stupid just keeps coming at you. Smart's like, man, I'm worn out. Stupid's like, I'm just warming up. It is amazing how, like, can you imagine how smart the scientists and the doctors, the immunologists had to be to come up with a vaccine against COVID? They wasn't ready for stupid. They were too smart. And this is not a new fight. This fight ain't new, all right? And I'm talking now to people who you were around before the internet, right? Because the younger people, you've lived with the internet, you don't know. But there used to be a time when we had two groups of people. You had people who know shit and people who don't know shit. And back in the day, the people who didn't know shit respected the people who knew shit. And you would be in a situation, it might be work or social situation, and the people who know shit would be talking about, well, I know some shit. Yeah, I know some shit too. Let's talk about shit we know. I know shit. And the people who don't know shit would kind of hang in the back. And they'd be quiet, and you'd be like, well, why aren't you talking? I don't know shit. I don't know shit. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. I'm gonna try to learn some shit. And then they invented the internet, and the people who know shit began to communicate with each other, and they were like, well, I know shit. Yeah, well, so do I. And we're going to share knowledge. And the people who don't know shit got on the internet and said, wow, there's a lot of us. There's more of us than them. And we can buy guns. And that was the end. That was the beginning of the end right there. Yeah. Thank you.
Alonzo Bodden, Stupid Don't Get Tired, available on YouTube. You should watch that. Everybody, go on there. Watch it. Download it. It's hysterical. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Thank you, man. That was the longest promo clip anyone's ever played. That was like getting a movie preview, and then you're like, I don't have to go.
There's a lot more to it, so people need to go ahead and watch it. If they haven't seen you live, it's always a pleasure seeing you. And I love how that special was shot. It was shot in the environment that we know, being in a comedy club. I really, really like the feel of how that was done.
Yeah, more and more specials are being done that way. I mean, it's fun to do theaters, and I've done the big theater production special, but as you said, clubs, that's where it all starts, right? That's where comedy, I think, is at its best. 200-300 seats. A friend of mine was in Rod Stewart's band and had played the biggest venues in the world. And he said, the best venue is when you can see everyone's eyes. So more fun to do a club than to do, I mean, with Rod Stewart, it was, 70,000 seat stadiums. So even though I wouldn't mind the payday of a 70,000 seat stadium, I'm sure Bill Burr did pretty good filling Fenway Park.
yeah, I know, right? It's like you look at that, you go, I'm happy with my packed comedy club. But then, you look at Fenway Park or some soccer stadium in Copenhagen, you go, all right, that might be cool too. What made you go ahead and put your special on YouTube? I'm seeing more and more comedians going that route.
Yeah, this was it was actually a partnership with Helium, the chain of comedy clubs. They had the idea, we'll record these specials I recorded it at Helium in Philly, and the initial rollout was all on social media. So we did clips on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and wherever else for a few months. We actually started releasing the clips in May. And then by July, we had hopefully whet people's appetite and dropped the whole thing on YouTube. So the idea was this entire special was going to be for social media versus previous ones I'd done where it goes to Showtime and then it ends up on social media. And one of the problems with that, as you well know, is no control over it, right? So you try to release something on Showtime or Amazon, and right away somebody puts it on YouTube. As a friend of mine in the music business said, as you're walking out of the studio, finished recording it, it is somehow already on YouTube. So we figured if you can't beat them, join them.
That is so sad, but completely so true. Let me ask you three random questions. I like to do this just to throw a little wrench in the interview, just so the audience can get a feel for who Alonzo Bodden is. Here we go. I break up with someone when they do blank.
I can listen. I'm not a relationship guy, as you know. I've never been married. I'm married to stand up. So unfortunately, I've broken up with them when they got too close.
Okay. Band or a singer you would pay any amount to see?
Wow. There's a few people on that list. We talking alive or dead?
Either one.
Okay. Dead, Miles Davis, because I never got to see him. So I would pay any amount to see Miles. Live, that's such a tough one. And I'm going to go with a guy who I've seen, but I still love seeing all the time, and that's Robert Glasper.
Nice. Here we go. Introducing Extreme Baseball. Extreme Baseball. It's like baseball, but with blank.
The ball's on fire. Oh, yeah. That'll make it interesting. People say baseball's boring. Not with a ball of fire. A literal ball of fire would make it interesting.
What you were on Dr. Phil? What did you? When I saw this on your bio, I had to ask, what did you do on Dr. Phil? Was this a relationship that went south, or how'd you end
No,
up on
no,
that?
it was a panel. It
Okay.
was a whole panel discussion about today's culture and racism and a number of things like that. So it was kind of funny being on there because I was the only one on the panel who didn't have letters behind my name. You know, it's like MA, PhD, doctor, this or that, and comedian. But it was fun. It was cool.
Well, it's a good fresh perspective instead of just getting it from somebody who is, comes from that complete academia background. It's great to have somebody on there.
They did have a police officer on, which was cool because this was in 2020, right? So this is when obviously Black Lives Matter was a big movement, and there was a lot of cultural stuff going on. So they did have a police officer on there. I think he was from Tennessee or somewhere, but it was cool. But yeah. It was nice to meet Dr. Phil. He was actually a pretty cool guy. So, I don't know how many of those type of shows you've done, the big talk shows and panel shows, but I always like when you can meet the host before the show. I always feel that makes a difference. Some of them, you don't say a word to him until you're sitting there on the panel. But with him, he just, just a minute beforehand, how you doing, and, what the show's going to be. So that was cool.
Yeah, it doesn't take too much just to break the ice and kind of make everyone feel welcome. It's, it's his house. It's like somebody comes to your house. It's like, yeah, here's, welcome. So it's good when they get a chance to talk with you beforehand. I want to go back in time here. Last Comic Standing, season 3. I was looking that up. 2004. Isn't that?
Yeah.
Isn't that unreal to think that it was 18 years ago?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I still remember it. It was actually, 04 and 05. Last Comic was a great experience for me. A lot of people have different experiences with the show. It was all good for me. Obviously, winning it made it a pretty good memory. But it was also kind of my introduction to America, right? Being on primetime TV. The big difference between then and now is when we did it, there was no social media. As Heffron and he won season 2. As we always joke about, we had a ton of MySpace friends that have seemed to have been lost.
MySpace. Oh my God, that is such a lot. That is literally like finding an album in your grandma's closet right now to even talk about MySpace, which is so funny.
Yeah, but that's all we had back then.
Yeah. What do people not know about that show?
The biggest misconception of the show is that it was rigged. And I've been on all sides of the show. I've been a contestant. I've been a judge. And here's the thing. If the fix was in, nobody told me, and I think as a winner, somebody might have let me know I was going to win, would have relieved a lot of anxiety. The other thing is NBC had absolutely nothing vested in the winner. In other words, it wasn't like they would look at the 10 comics and say, oh, this one will be great on a TV series. Let's hype this person, make them win, and give them a show. There was actually an internal battle at NBC for airtime, right? And this is the stuff you don't know. On one side, you have what's called scripted TV, which is like sitcoms and dramas and stuff. On the other side, you have unscripted, which is, reality shows, documentaries, news, whatever. They're fighting for airtime on NBC. In other words, there's only one 8 o'clock spot on Thursday. There's only one 9 o'clock spot on Tuesday. Scripted and unscripted are fighting. The last thing scripted is going to do is take somebody from unscripted, which is what we are, and put them on their roster. So there was no fix. There was nothing in it for the network to make sure that I won or Heffron or Felipe Esparza or Eliza Schlesinger or John Reap or any of the winners.
Right.
As you go through the names, not one of us got a hit NBC sitcom.
Now, you ended up becoming a judge on Last Comic Standing. Now, how was that critiquing fellow comics? That to me, that would seem to be a little bit challenging. I mean, were there any
It was
odd, bad exchanges with the comedians that you were critiquing when you were on the panel?
no, no. The comics were cool. There were a couple of managers who held grudges, but being on the other side of the table was fascinating. The first thing you realize is how many people are doing the same thing and how you could almost tell how long someone had been working by what their material was. Meaning um, early in career, first couple of years, a lot of bodily functions. Okay, a lot of bodily functions involved in those jokes. Then you had the era of travel and relationships, which is probably in the, say, 3 to 7 or 8 year um, portion of the career. And then you had the people who were more, they've learned their voices and they're more individual. It broke down, well, there's so much to tell here. One of the things that we realized, okay, if you had 100 comics, you had 10% that were a sideshow, retired porn star. We had a guy came in as a Viking for some odd reason, just different, train wrecks that you would watch just because it was so weird. Then you had 10% absolutely can't miss. You're going to the next round. You are a professional. We probably know who you are, but you were very good. Then you had probably about 60%, 70% that were good, but not ready yet. Funny, not ready for TV, maybe didn't have enough material to sustain through a series. A lot of people doing the same jokes. For some reason, there were jokes that bothered each of us as judges. Kathleen Madigan, she didn't like the halfer jokes. She didn't like, my dad's Puerto Rican, my mom is Jewish, so I'm blank. It's a formulaic joke she didn't like. I didn't like, there were so many women talking about a homeless guy asked me out and blank. And I said, the one I'm putting on is the one who says a homeless guy asked me out. And I said, get away from me, you bum. Because you didn't date a homeless guy. So stop pretending. But anyway, the toughest people was the 20% that were good. They were ready. They deserved the show. But how do you pick one over the other? Those were the toughest ones, and some of those choices we made, and there's really, sometimes it came down to what city you auditioned in, right? If you auditioned in Miami, there might not be as many good comics as, auditioning somewhere else. And I'll tell you what was a surprise. We had a lot of spots open for New York, thinking New York's going to give us a bunch of great comics. Minneapolis had the strongest run because you had all of these great comics from the Midwest that all traveled to Minneapolis. That was a hard place to say no. And I'd say the biggest name we turned down at the time was Lil Rel Lowry, who is now a legitimate movie star, great guy. And I saw him once and I talked to him about it and he laughed and he was like, yeah, I might not have been ready then, but no, I won't give you a job in one of my movies.
That is so funny. Let me ask you this. What was your life before comedy? Because you're from New York originally. You're in California now.
Yeah,
What was your
I
life
grew up
before
in
you
New
started
York.
doing this?
I grew up in New York, went to aviation high school in Long Island City, trained and got licensed as being an airplane mechanic. and I was hired by Lockheed Aircraft in Burbank, and I worked in the aerospace industry. Well, I worked as a mechanic for 10 years, and I trained new mechanics for a couple of years after that. So that's why my entire career has been based in LA, even though I'm from New York. I started my comedy career in LA. Aerospace was great. I mean, I got to work on some fascinating things. Probably the most fascinating was the F-117, the original stealth fighter. And I worked on that when it was all top secret in the early 80s. I mean, top secret. Trump wouldn't have even had files at Mar-a-Lago. It was that secret. And that was a fascinating experience to work on that. And then the other thing that I worked on that was really fun were private jets for the super rich, people who buy a Boeing 727 and then say, okay, make it my private plane. Though that's rich.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the not so popular super rich people. Jeffrey Epstein had one of those.
Yeah, he may have. He may have. Probably the one that was fun to work on was Malcolm Forbes. Malcolm Forbes had his own jet, and he kept 2 Harleys and a Corvette in the cargo bay, so he'd have something to drive when he landed.
Well, I know you're a big car and motorcycle dude. So what's your go-to motorcycle that you have always dreamt of that you would want in your garage right now?
The bike I'd always wanted, even though my old knees probably can't ride it, is called the Ducati Desmo Sedici. And it was basically a MotoGP, which is top level race bike, but made for the street. They put lights on it and made it street legal, and it was an insane bike. So I put that at the top of my list. Car wise, Derek, I've gotten lazy, comfortable. I want a Rolls Royce Ghost. I want a Rolls Royce Coupe. I want to relax.
Well, I think you posted a picture of that on your social media, which, by the way, people can follow you. Go to his website, alonzobodden.com, and connect with him on social media. But you posted a picture of a Rolls Royce, and you said, I wish I was funnier.
Yeah, we were at the MGM Towers, which was really, this is what's really funny. So the towers are kind of the condos behind the hotel. And there was a Rolls Royce parked out front. And I'm thinking, the hell are you doing staying here? You got a Rolls Royce. Why aren't you up in the penthouse? But for whatever reason, it was there. I think God put it there to taunt me, because every day I had to walk past that car and realize, yeah, I'm not that funny yet.
There's a cool special that's out right now. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a series running on Vice TV called The Dark Side of Comedy. And the 3 episodes that I've seen so far, it's really cool. They did an episode on Chris Farley. They got one on Roseanne Barr. They have one on Andrew Dice Clay. And I was watching the Dice Clay one. And, of course, he's being called out for his act back in the day, which was very misogynistic and homophobic. And he got called out. And the brunt of that all kind of cascaded down upon him. Now, he took all the heat. But let me ask you this. Doesn't some of the responsibility fall on the agents, managers, and promoters that were booking him and continuously making money off of that very act? Because it seemed like it was, yes, it came out of his mouth, but there were a lot of people involved putting him at Madison Square Garden and selling tons of, at the time, comedy albums, specials, everything else, that whole persona. Isn't there, like I said, it just seemed like all of a sudden, once the bad heat came on him, everybody backed way off. And I'm like, hang on, there's more people involved in this. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple of thoughts here, Derek. So, as you know, my special is called Stupid Don't Get Tired, because it's a constant battle against stupid. Now, I remember when they went after Dice. If you were dumb enough to think that those were his actual views on life, his jokes were, one of the things about jokes is when they get that extreme, right? When the misogyny gets as extreme as he got it, when the homophobia gets as extreme as he got it, if you don't realize he's joking, if you think that, this is one of the problems we have, Derek. Comics are held to a higher standard than politicians. Listen, if Dice says something, that ain't the same as a congressman saying something. That ain't the same as a senator saying something. That's Dice on stage. And it was ridiculous, you know. As far as the agents, the managers, the producers, the bookers, Derek, as you well know, they're in it for the money. These people have no conscience. Who can we make money off of? Who do we love this week, this month? And that's what that's whichever way the wind blows. Listen, unfortunately, and we talked about this earlier, right, with comedy clubs, from comedy clubs on up to the biggest theaters or arenas, they're looking at asses in seats. They ain't looking at funny. I don't know if funny is in the top 5 things they look for, but asses in seats is the number one thing they look for. And Dice was putting asses in seats. And Dice, he was one of the first comics, I think, to fill Madison Square Garden. Excuse me. And trust me, that night, nobody had a complaint about Dice being misogynistic. Will they turn their back as soon as the wind blows? Absolutely. It's what they do.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of odd. They were talking to a couple different comedians today, some female comics that were really taking umbrage to what Dice was doing on stage. And I found myself literally in my living room, Alonzo, watching I'm yelling at the TV, going, I cannot believe that as a comedian, you're turning on your colleague. You know, whether you like his act or not. I mean, I'm like, come on, you got to be kidding me.
It's also a different time. I mean, Dice was doing that. We're talking 30 years ago.
Oh yeah,
you know,
easily.
Yep. A lot of us did things 20 and 30 years ago we wouldn't do today. We said things we wouldn't say today. You know, I always joke about it. Smoking. Back then, you remember when you could smoke anywhere and it was considered normal? And when they said they're going to ban smoking, everybody was like, well, I'm never going to a restaurant again. I'm never going to a bar. I'm never going. And yeah, right. People went to restaurants and bars and they smoked outside. And now we've come full circle to where, okay, you can't smoke cigarettes in here, but if you're smoking weed, come on in.
Yeah, vape away.
So, yeah,
no
you know, this will always happen. It's very easy to judge in the rearview mirror, right? It's like it's football season, right? There's nothing easier than picking a football game on Monday.
That is true. That is true. The occasional dark side of this business is a stalker. And I'm only bringing this up because you and I were talking about you had this instance happen to you. What was that all about? What was that like for you?
Well, let me say this. I was lucky in that this woman was annoying but not dangerous. I felt for women before in this situation. I've talked to women who've had this situation. I think it's much more dangerous for a woman to be stalked by a man than a man to be stalked by a woman. Now, I know there are weapons and guns and it could be dangerous either way, but just physically, I think it's more dangerous. This woman was just really annoying. It started out online. She asked me about doing a show in Germany, which is where she was from. I had no idea who it was, but, you know, on the website, they have a, you know, click here and you send an email and the email comes to an account that I deal with the website. And I just passed it on to my manager. And as I always do, and they chit chatted and it wasn't going to come up. Then she popped up live in LA, which was weird, but not didn't bother me. And then she came to a few other shows, and that's when it became like they get into the meet and greet line all the time and they don't want to leave, and you notice like, okay, this is becoming annoying. It became a problem when she wrote something online about my family, because I never talk about my family in social media, other than my dog, the Hulk's on there. And so anyway, ultimately what happened was, after telling clubs to not sell her tickets, after blocking her repeatedly on social media because she would just change different IDs and stuff like that, she showed up live and kind of walked up on me. She had tracked me down to my hotel on Martha's Vineyard and followed me from the hotel, and was so crazy, Derek, that I said, I'm walking into this police station. The police station literally happened to be a half a block. And she followed me into the police station. And the police took the report. You know, they separate you, right? And they have me talk to one officer, she talks to another. And the officer that talked to her came back and was like, this woman's crazy. She hasn't denied a thing. She is, you know, and they were like, we're going to keep her here. You go back to your hotel. We're going to deal with it. I got what's called an order of protection. You can't get a restraining order against someone who you don't have a relationship with. And I don't have any relationship with this person, right? This is just a random fan.
Sure.
So I got the order of protection, and they arrested her and took her off the island. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, she's not even from this country. She's from Germany. So I don't know if they said they'll talk to Homeland Security. Another thing about being a crazy person, you don't want to be a crazy person on an island where an ex-president lives. You know, Barack Obama has a house on Martha's Vineyard. That's a bad place to be crazy, where there's an ex-president nearby, because now Homeland Security and the Secret Service get your name. So hopefully she's gone. But for me, it was more of an annoyance than a danger. But people are out there, you know, and the cops were funny. They were like, how does she find you? It's like, I'm a comic. I post everywhere I'm going. I wish more people would find me.
Well, you don't exactly blend into a crowd. I mean, you're six. What are you, 6'4",
No, but
6'5"?
it's not. Yeah, I'm 6'3", but it's not even that.
Right.
No, when people
Right.
lock in, like my friend Tammy Pescatelli. I don't know if you know Tam. I love Tam. We've known each other
She's
forever.
a sweetheart. Yep.
She had a guy showing up at her shows with a life-size cutout of her. Think about how scary that is.
Wow.
Think about that. That is, you know, that's not autograph a picture. That's I am sleeping with a life-size picture of you in my room or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I say it can be much more dangerous with women.
Oh, no doubt. Well, I know for sure right now. I'm just jotting this down that I'm going to get an Alonzo Bodden fathead and bring it into the green room if Brad's next time you're there. Put it on the wall for everybody to enjoy. Well, I hope this situation is resolved and she's not hasn't bothered you since the Martha's Vineyard incident. So hopefully that's in the.
I haven't heard from her. I do have a friend who's kind of a social media investigator, which is something that exists now. And she said she tracked this woman down and she said all of her social media was about me, which is really weird.
Wow. That is creepy. Yeah, male, female, I don't care who it is. I mean, that just having that kind of an energy around you just is very bizarre. Shifting gears here, you're a frequent guest on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. How did that come about? I love that show.
I had an agent, and that's probably the only good thing he ever did. You know what was great for me with Wait, Wait? The first time I did it, I had never heard of it. I had never listened to it. I had no idea what I was walking into. I just was told it was a radio panel show about the news. Be funny about the news. And I'm like, oh, it's a panel show. I've done a million of these. I'll be fine. I did it. It went great. Peter Sagal, the host, came up and said, man, that was one of the best first shows we've ever seen, you know. And I'm just thinking like, well, all I had to do is be funnier than Tom Bodett. With all due respect, Tom, I think I can handle that. But then I later found out how big the show was. I'll tell you when I really realized how big it was. Carl Castle was the original announcer, and he retired, and they invited me to Carl's retirement party, and it was in D.C., and I was working somewhere. I can't be, you know, I'm thinking like, that's a weird invite. Now I'll pass. I'm not going to be there. I come to find out Tom Hanks is there, and just a ton of people. Barack Obama sent a congratulatory message to him. I mean, it was a who's who of everyone in the news. I was like, oh, so I guess this show is kind of popular.
Well, the cool thing about that show too is that it exposes you and your comedy to a very a much smarter audience.
Yeah, the NPR nerds are phenomenal because anything you talk about, they know. They probably know more about it than you do. And it takes a while for them to accept you. But once they accept you, they are a phenomenal audience. And now we're doing the Wait stand-up tour. I'm the host. And we do these live shows with the comics from Wait. And when we say it's uncensored, people think, oh, they're going to be cursing. It's like, yeah, there's a little bit of that, but it's more we can go in on topics rather than have 1 minute to answer a question. It's our act, so we can talk a lot
Sure.
more about what we want to talk about. And the response has been great.
That's super cool. You've done a. Let me ask you this: what's the worst job that you had before comedy?
Let's see. There's been a few. I painted addresses on curbs. That was fun. Yeah, there were a number of crazy jobs like that. I mounted TV monitors in 7-Elevens working for the lottery commission. You do whatever you got to do to pay the rent until comedy pays off. So those were the jobs that were just kind of tough and a grind. And and selling cars. I was actually good at selling cars because the customers are easy to deal with. But the other salesmen and the managers, it's an all commission business. And they are some cutthroat people. That side of it was ugly. It was, I love cars, but I would never want to be in the car business.
Yeah, that is cutthroat. I know people that have done car sales before, and that's exactly what they say. They go, everybody else, the customers are great. Your colleagues are the ones that are the pain in the ass.
Yeah, you talk about swimming with sharks.
Oh, God, I can't even imagine. You had a cool story. We were talking over at the comedy club. You do acting. You met Steve Martin. Tell me about that experience.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Derek, my acting career has been security and cop and Secret Service person to the biggest stars in the business. I've protected Steve Martin and Queen Latifah and Leslie Nielsen, and the list is endless. we were doing this movie called Bringing Down the House. It was Queen Latifah and Steve Martin. And the scene is I'm supposed to stop Steve Martin from going to a house party that Queen Latifah is throwing at his house. So it's rehearsal. I'm standing there with one of the background people, and Steve Martin walks up with the director. And the background guy next to me was like, whoa, it's Steve Martin. And Steve just looked at him and said, I'm acting. So in my mind, it's like, okay, Steve's very serious. Leave him alone. I'm like, I get it. So during a break or lunch or something like that, one of his assistants said, hey, you're a comic. Steve loves comics. You should, say hello to him. So I go over and I introduce myself, and he's real cool. He says, hey, what's your first line? And I said, it changes every show. It depends on where I'm at. He's like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I said to him, you quit. You were at the top of the business. You were probably the number one stand-up comic there was, and you just walked away. Do you ever miss it? And he says, well, I joke around. I host things now and then. I said, like, what do you host? And he stopped. He looked at me and said, the Oscars. And I looked right at him and said, who books that? And he just started cracking up, and we were cool after that.
He always strikes me as someone that would be a very cool person to meet and hang out with. He seems very, very down to earth.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. You with people like that, I think as long as you're respectful of their time and joke with them, they're very cool with it. it's not like we're going to sit next to each other and be best of friends, but we had a few laughs. I was doing the scene, and the director was like, "Can you make it more, whatever?" And I'm like, "More hood." And he was like, "Yeah." And I said, "I live in the valley." And Steve just leaned in and said, "That is the hood."
You are one of the most prolific writers. Every time I've seen you, you always have just an absolute ton of new material. What is your process?
If it strikes me as funny, I write it down. I learned my mentors were some great writers, one of which dropped in, George Wallace,
Hmm.
and way back when, I mean, this is 20 years ago, 20 plus, almost 30 years ago now. Damn, we're getting old, Derek. But anyway,
I know.
I would be at the Laugh Factory. George always had that yellow pad. He always had that pad with him. And it was like, write it down. If you think it, write it down. If it's funny, write it down. Then I go on stage and I talk about it, and it grows from there. And sometimes, especially features who've worked with me, they'll hear me in the middle of my act. Oh, I got to write that down so I don't forget it. And they'll make a note of the joke I just made, because a lot of it now, you develop a shorthand in your brain, right? And it just comes to you, and you write it down the way you said it. But that's what it is. It's constant. I started doing topical comedy really right after Last Comic. I started becoming more topical and less personal. So there's always things going on to talk about. And some of them are just a flash in the pan, and then others stay with you for a while, as far as what the topics are. But
Sure.
yeah, I'm always, my favorite joke, Derek, is always the newest one I'm working on, the latest thing that I'm working on. And now I'm trying to get more personal, because the last few award-winning specials haven't been comedy specials as much as they've been therapy sessions on stage. So I have to figure out how to do personal therapy on stage, and then maybe Netflix will notice.
Is there a reason why you've stayed away from that? Is it just kind of one of those things where you, as a comedian and as a person, where you just kind of have a little bit of a wall built up? You're like, you know what? I'm going to keep
No, it
some of this to
it
myself.
wasn't that as much as it was I found the world funnier than me. At the time when I really started doing topical stuff, I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California. Paris Hilton was famous for doing absolutely nothing. George Bush was the president on a bicycle. Dick Cheney was the diabolical mastermind. Like, there was so much funny and crazy and ridiculous in the news. I had more fun with that than I did with talking about, my dating life or whatever. So that's when I made the switch, and it's an endless supply of what's funny.
Well, yeah, I'd say you're right. It's funny because some comedians won't talk about personal stuff just because they're like, listen, I'm not gonna let people into that portion of me. And
No,
so
it's not that. It's just that I don't find, like, I remember Paul Reiser talking about this once, how your act changes. Like, you're a single guy, you talk about dating, then you're married, you do jokes about the wife, then you have a kid, now you have those jokes about the kid, and so on. And I was like, yeah, my life never developed beyond the single guy who travels on the road a lot. I had no problem talking about my personal stuff on stage. It's just, again, I didn't find it as funny as what was going on in the world. Now, when something funny
sure.
happens to me personally, yeah, I will definitely joke about it on stage. And like my dog, I joke about my dog because he's hilarious. And I had a thing where I would joke about women I dated, and I had one friend. She knew which woman inspired each joke. She's like, "Yeah, Alonzo, you like them crazy, but I remember this joke was this one, this joke was that one." Yeah, she could pick which ones inspired which joke.
What is the? Let's go ahead and I'm going to pull up your tour dates. Sean, go ahead and pull up Alonzo's upcoming shows here. What is the best advice that you were given?
The best comedy stand-up advice. There's been a number of things. One was the thing about writing all the time. Another piece of advice, I got this early on from Tommy Davidson. He said, never think on stage. He said, once you're on stage, like, especially when you're new and you're trying to remember your act, he said, once you're on stage, either you know it or you don't, but either way, you're up there. So don't think when you're on stage, stay in the moment. That was great advice. Another great piece of advice that I give all up and coming comics, particularly feature comics: have a reliable car, because you have to get to the gig. There's it sounds simple, right? But it really is true. Like, this isn't a job. We're not working at the plant. We're not working at the store. You can't be late for work. You have to be there. And when you're the feature act, usually you're driving all over the country because you're not getting paid enough yet to fly anywhere. So you got to drive, like, say, like you're based in Vegas, right? So you got to drive from Vegas to Salt Lake City to Boise, Idaho, to San Francisco, to Fresno, and back home in 10 days. You can't do that with a piece of crap car. It's like, yeah, you need a Honda, a Toyota, something that uses no gas and doesn't break down. And I used to tell comics, sounds funny, but get a car that you can depend on, because if you don't show up, and you know this too, Derek, you've been there, starting out in your career, if you miss a gig because your car broke down, guess what? You ain't getting booked again. That's it. No. You're done.
No, you're not. Now let's flip the coin here. What's the worst advice you were ever given?
I love Jamie Masada, the owner of the Laugh Factory. It is my home club. Jamie has helped me in 1,000 ways over the years. But the worst piece of advice he gave me early in my career, he said I should be a sports comic and go on stage in uniform and talk about football or basketball. I said, no.
What athlete would have, past or present, what athlete would you have loved to have been for a week in their prime?
Well, Derek, as you know, and as many women believe, I played for the '89 Clippers. I'm sticking to that story, Derek. You're not getting me to give that up. I was there, '89. It was tough. That's such a tough question. I think Magic Johnson, 80s Magic Johnson. There was no one more loved, and no one was having a better time. That was the difference between Magic, Michael, and Bird. You never saw Bird or Michael smiling. Magic was having a ball. As we found out later, maybe too much of a ball, but Magic was having a ball. And I've said that in today's world about LeBron, right? With everything that they've thrown at LeBron, and they've tried to hate him for every reason possible. But when you look at him and you look at his contemporaries, he's having fun. You see him smile on stage. You see him every now and then joking with one of the fans who's down by the court or whatever. And I think I love that in an athlete, when there's, you're the greatest there is, and you played under pressure, you win championships, you do all of that, but you still remember it's fun. With stand-up, George Wallace, who's been doing this for almost 50 years now, he's still smiling, telling you, I got the best job in the world. I have the best job in the world. And there are times I think we all need to remember that.
Yeah, George is one of the best guys out there. He really is. Just a solid human, and just a great writer. Again, to be still so active and so into it at his age and doing it so many years.
Yeah. He's also a multimillionaire who owns 32 houses, so that makes it easier to be happy. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, you can smile a little more when you got that in your bank account. Now, you don't drink now. Did you ever?
I drank too much. I've been sober since '88. Drugs and alcohol. Listen, the '80s was a cocaine era. I did my best, and my best was a little too much. So, again, another brilliant timing move. I went to rehab before I started comedy. Now, Derek, if I had any sense, I'd have gone to rehab. I'd have gone to rehab right after Last Comic Standing. That was my sweet spot. That would have made me famous. But no, I have to give up drugs and alcohol before I even start. Yeah, another great move.
You put up some Hall of Fame numbers, though, in a short period of time. If you stopped back in 1988, because you're only a couple years older than I am, and I mean that's you racked up some mileage on your car.
Yeah, cocaine and crack will do that to you, Derek. Sorry, Derek. No, I honestly, I went through the ringer with that. I went through the cocaine and crack addiction in the 80s. It got really bad. And when I was done, I was done. And I was fortunate, and I will definitely say this, I was fortunate to have gone to rehab, and I went to meetings at a place called Studio 12. The stars went to Betty Ford, the crew went to Studio 12. So I literally cleaned up with guys who were like grips and electricians and wardrobe designers and makeup artists. People that was my first exposure to this business, but they were really cool people. And you know what I learned from them is that you can love your job, because they all loved what they did. And that was unusual to me, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, I'm very grateful that that's how it played out. I sometimes wonder if I hadn't gone through that, would I have ever found comedy, or would I have just lived my life as a mechanic working, 7 to 3:30? I don't know. But I have no regrets. It played out the way it was supposed to.
What was your tipping point? What finally made you go, I got it?
Getting arrested.
This needs to stop.
Getting arrested. Spending a night in jail, and you realize, like, this ain't for me. This wasn't my plan. This isn't how I wanted to end up. Because if you make that normal, then that's going to keep happening, and it's only going to get worse. And I didn't want to make that my normal.
Yeah, well played. Nicely done. I mean, there's a lot of people that.
Well, it wasn't a choice. I mean, we have a thing in recovery where you're beaten into a state of willingness. So it's like, okay, well, I can go to recovery, or I could continue going to jail. So yeah, I chose the right path.
Yes, you did. Now, as we wrap up here, by the way, people follow Alonzo at alonzobodden.com and see him coming up in Seattle, Buffalo, and also Colorado Springs. Alonzo Bodden, BODDEN.com is his website, and follow him on
I always
media.
tell him,
also,
just look up Comic Alonzo. It's going to be either me or Christella, and it's really not hard to tell us apart.
No, it is not. And also make sure you grab his special, Alonzo Bodden, Stupid Don't Get Tired, which was on YouTube, produced by Helium Comedy Studios. You can go on YouTube and snag that right now. You can watch it absolutely free. It's a fantastic special. Now, we talked about Ving Rhames and James Earl Jones back in the green room when we were working over at Brad Garrett's club. And you and I were joking around. You're like, man, I could have done all those voiceovers, because you have a very deep, resonating voice. And the voiceovers that Ving Rhames does, which is Arby's, we have the meats. And then, of course, James Earl Jones has, this is CNN. And I remember we were back there talking. We were laughing our asses off. And you're like, man, they could have called me. I would have done that for a whole lot less. So,
Derek.
Yes, sir.
This is CNN. Huh?
Perfect.
Derek, we have the meats.
Now I want you to.
And I do it for $500. I do it for $500 and a lifetime Arby's card. You understand? $500 and a lifetime Arby's card. They could have had a spokesperson, but no, they wanted a movie star.
All right, I'm going to give you 3 products that I want you to deliver that an advertising slug line for the following 3. The first one is, it doesn't need to be whatever slug line they use. It can be whatever slug line you want to give them. So the first one is going to be Budweiser.
I'm trying to remember, but I don't remember Budweiser's thing. So
the original was the King of Beers.
Budweiser, the King of Beers. Budweiser, the King of Beers. I like giving that smooth jazz romantic thing. Budweiser, the king of beer.
All right, now I want you to make up one for Depends undergarments.
Depends when you know it depends on depends.
And finally, Adam and Eve adult toy store. Adam and Eve adult toy store.
Adam and Eve adult toys for when Eve isn't around.
Alonzo, I can't thank you enough, my friend. So good to see you. I had a great time working with you. Again, check out his special, Stupid Don't Get Tired, available on YouTube, and see Alonzo when he comes to your neck of the woods. Seattle, Buffalo, and Colorado Springs are the next ones on the list. And go to your website, alonzobodden.com. Thank you so much for your time, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Derek. I'll see you next trip to Vegas, man. Take care of yourself.
Absolutely. You too, bud. Alonzo Bodden
Bye.
here on A Drink with Derek. Fun conversation with him. Always great to talk with funny friends, and just a great guy. So again, alonzobodden.com is his website. And if you want to come out and see me do a show, I'm going to be working in Lexington, Michigan, and also Bay City, Michigan, with my good friend Dave Landau, who you've seen on Louder with Crowder, and also heard him on Louder with Crowder on September 30th, Lexington, Michigan. Only a few scattered seats available for that. Go to my website, DerekRichards.com, to buy your tickets. And then also Bay City, Michigan at the State Theater on Saturday, October 1st. Again, my website has the link right on there to go ahead and snag tickets for that show. And then also, while you're online, grab a copy of my album, Double Down, available on Spotify. It's on the iTunes. It's on Amazon. And huge thanks to all the folks over at Laughing Comedy Cafe in Fort Myers for making that happen. And I can't thank you enough for joining me here today. Go on YouTube to get all the prior episodes of Drink with Derek. Also, Rumble has them as well. You can get the audio versions of it on iTunes and wherever you grab your podcast. I appreciate you. Derek Richards here in Vegas. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to A Drink with Derek. Find out when Derek is appearing near you by checking out DerekRichards.com. See you next time for A Drink with Derek.